they're not saying that because they don't love you. Oftentimes they're saying it because they do, because they're projecting their own fears. And to some degree, it's their way of protecting. But what they don't realize and what they won't understand is that the pursuit of greatness and the risk that's associated is way more fulfilling than the comfort of knowing exactly what tomorrow brings.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University. We have a very, very special guest today. She has joined us in the past. She is the former mental performance coach for the New York Yankees and a current wonderful human being, an amazing speaker, all amazing things. And one of her favorite things is you become elite by choice. So today we will help you get elite by choice. Lauren Johnson, what is going on, my friend?
Oh my gosh, I'm just so happy to be here with you two. Two of my favorite humans on the planet. So thank you again for having me.
We appreciate you joining us. Alan set this up, and I'm very excited he did. So I know Alan is going to go a certain way. I am going to start with this question. And you mentioned this word in the preamble. It was environment. How do you know, and how can somebody out there know if their environment is helping them or holding them back when it's coming to performance in their life?
Well, I heard this analogy the other day, and I think it describes the point we're trying to get across with environment perfectly. If you take the seed of an oak tree and you put it in a pot, a 2-foot pot, that oak tree is never going to be able to grow in its glory and as a large, huge, beautiful oak tree that it can, because it is constrained and limited by the environment that it's been put in. And that oak tree is meant to be large and beautiful and have all of these limbs and leaves. And I think that when we look at our environment, my question is that each and every one of us, we're born to be great in our own way. Each and every one of us are our own seed. And so the question is, if you look around you, how does your environment impact your performance? Do you feel constrained? Do you feel limited? Are the people you're choosing to surround yourself with, are they adding to your growth? Or are they taking it away from you? Are, the things that you're consuming, are they adding to your growth or are they taking it away from you? Are the habits that you do on a day-to-day basis, are they getting you closer to where you want to be or further away? And so I think when we think about environment, it plays a big role in our performance and as a whole, because we're meant to be great, but oftentimes we allow our environments to constrain us. Mm-hmm. And so it would be more of a reflective question as to taking inventory on your environment and asking yourself, is this helping me move the needle in the direction I want to be?
Super synchronistic answer, considering I had Coast Redwood trees and a little Coast Redwood acorn at my presentation at Next Level Live. So that was very, very synchronistic. So I had a photo up of a redwood acorn, like I just mentioned, and then I had a picture of a fully grown 100-year-old Coast Redwood. And I said, how does this little acorn become this unbelievably 130-foot tall tree? And the next slide was self-belief compounded over time. And so my question for you, Lauren, is how does belief tie into someone's performance and ultimately their results that they get in their life? Because everyone on this show, listening to the show, watching the show, they're listening and watching not necessarily just for fun, but because they want their life to get better. And I don't think their life will get better unless they first get better, which requires some level of self-belief. How does self-belief tie into the results someone ultimately gets in their life in terms of fulfillment, in terms of love, in terms of health, in terms of wealth, in terms of happiness and productivity, self-belief? Go ahead.
Well, I think we have to take a step back, because I think when we think of self-belief, belief impacts the things we do not do, the things we allow, we do not allow, and then that impacts our performance. I think there's a step right after that. And so the way I kind of came up with this formula, and you guys know this formula, I've talked to you guys about it before, But I think that when it comes to belief, there's also another thing that belief impacts, and that is the way that we see ourselves. And so in other words, I want you to think about your identity. That's the word I was looking for. Identity. So I want to tell you a story actually where I was working with a player. I'm at the Yankees several years ago. And I went to this affiliate, and I knew every single player by name. Like if you walked into into our facilities during spring training when every single player was there, I would be able to pick out the players that were just traded because I wouldn't have known them well enough. That's how well our staff knew every one of our players. And so I'm at this affiliate and I'm chatting with this player in the dugout. And every time I asked him a question, he gave me very short answers in return. And what that usually tells me is I usually try to reflect on myself and say, okay, maybe I haven't developed a good enough relationship with him. I want to spend more time with him during this trip. So that was my goal. Well, it's like no matter what I did, every time I tried to talk to him, he was like, lady, I don't want to talk to you. And it was very, very short, like one-word answers. And so one day I go to the batting cages early, and he's the only other person there. And he's taking hacks. He's getting warmed up early on. And I'm like, oh my God, he's probably like, oh God, now I have to talk to her. It's like, it's my worst nightmare. So I go up to him and I said, like, hey, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, I just want to make sure, have I said anything to offend you in any way? Because it seems like the last few times I've tried to have a discussion with you, you're very short with me. And I just want to make sure it's not something that I did and just wasn't aware of. And he said, no, that's not it. And I said, well, do you mind telling me, like, what is it then? And he said, I'm not a good speaker. And I kind of stood back and I'm like, what does that mean? And so we ended up meeting another day because the game was about to happen. It wasn't the time to dive in. We ended up meeting a little bit later. And I said, where did you get this idea that you were a bad speaker? And he's like, I don't know. I've just always been. He goes, especially when I speak to authority. So I just try to avoid it at all costs. And I asked him, I said, I want you to think back. Who told you that? Who is the first person? When was the first time you heard, I'm not good at speaking? And he had to stop and think about it. And finally he goes, man, I think the first time was in elementary school. He said, I had a really bad stutter when I would read. And so when the teacher would ask me to read out loud, I would kind of get made fun of, and I was told that I'm not very good at speaking. And so I wanted you to think about this for a second. His belief was, I'm not a good speaker. And so every time he acted in support of that belief, it reinforced this identity. And so identity equals belief plus action. So if you want to write that down so you have a visual, identity equals belief plus action. His belief was, I'm not a good speaker. And every time he avoided speaking, every time he gave one-word answers, every time he shrunk in the back of a room when people were like, do you have questions? He supported the belief that he wasn't a good speaker, and that became his identity. And so I know a lot of us carry around these limiting beliefs, these beliefs that sometimes we didn't even give ourselves. Somebody else handed to us and we carried the torch. And so I asked him, I said, who's telling you that now? And he's like, I am. And I said, is that who you want to be? He said, no, I hate it. It's a burden. And so if we rearrange the formula, we can change it. So if we go, okay, belief equals identity plus action. My question to everybody listening is, who do you want to become? Who is the identity and the person you want to become? So I asked him, who do you want to become? And he said, I want to become the person who isn't afraid to raise his hand in the middle of a group session and ask a question. I want to become a person who is willing to have full-on conversations with my manager, with my hitting coach, and with authority. And so I asked him, okay, great. What actions support that new identity? And we listed them out. And so one of the things we did, and nobody knew this was his and I's thing, was that every time I came and did a session with the team, I would prep him ahead of time with what question I was going to ask, so that he was ready and prepared to raise his hand to answer. Well, we did that for a while. until I no longer prepped him. And I would come in and I'd do a session and he would be the first hand raised. And he would come up and he'd stand next to me in the dugout. And we'd have full-on conversations. And so James Clear said this, every action you take casts a vote for who you want to become. So are the actions you're taking supporting who it is that you want to become? And if it's not, what action can you take that would support who you want to be? I want to be a runner. Great. What do you got to do? Run. Okay. What do you have? How do you have to start that? Okay. I want to be somebody. I want to be an author. Great. What's one action that supports that? Writing something small, even once a day. What are those things? What are those small actions that you can do in support? Because as you do that, you start to grow your belief. And there is a disproportionate amount of energy that is associated with somebody who has a deep belief in themselves and their ability.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Powerful.
That last right there, that was that last thing. There's a disproportionate. Can you say it one more time? And then Kev's got a question.
There's a disproportionate amount of energy that is associated with somebody who has a deep belief in themselves.
Wow.
Can you
that
go
was
in,
more synchronistic than I can possibly.
Can you go into that and unravel the layers of what that means?
Well, the way that I look at it is that if you have somebody, like I'll give an example of this. It was, and I'm going to forget his name right now, of course, right when you need it.
Just make up any name. Nobody's going to know.
Okay. Well, it's a big part
Call
of
him
his.
Jeff.
That's why I can't just make up a name here. You guys might be able to help me out here. It was the biggest upset in boxing history.
Mike Tyson. Buster Douglas.
And Buster Douglas. Thank you. I'm like, Buster Douglas. I don't know why that name had escaped me. Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas. If you know the backstory of this, a couple weeks before the fight, Buster Douglas's mother passed away. And months leading up to this fight, she was his biggest supporter. And he told her, he promised her, he said, Mom, I'm going to win this for you. And 2 weeks before he loses his mother, and he's out there, he's getting his butt handed to him. I mean, and he gets saved by the bell, and the next round comes up. And everybody thinks Mike Tyson has got him. Everybody's like, Mike Tyson's going to win. Mike Tyson's odds were insane. Like, there's no way. Like, this guy's he's going to come out. Mike Tyson's going to finish him. But what happened was the opposite of that. Buster Douglas came out swinging. Why? Because he had a passion. He had a belief. He had a reason that was so much bigger than him that gave him that energy to go do it. You know what it's like? If I'm getting my ass beat and I'm like, this sucks, right? Nobody likes that. This sucks. I don't want to be here. Nobody wants to be here. And so if I just said, well, I want to feel motivated, or just like keep going or push through, that's not very motivating in the moment, is it? But if I said, well, I can lay on the ground and, have my dreams die along with my mother, or I can get back up and fight for what I promised her I would do. Suddenly, there's a disproportionate belief that overtakes the feelings. It's greater than the feelings of pain that we're in currently. And when we speak to that part of our brain, we're speaking to the part of our brain that is in charge of decision making. And so some of the part of belief and knowing our why and having a passion and having a purpose that actually means something to us, what it is actually doing is we are speaking to the part of our brain that is in charge of decision making. And so sometimes it comes down to how we actually communicate with our brain centers that are responsible for action. And so sometimes I remember I was speaking with this woman who was like, Lauren, I get the process, building routines, all of this, like I'm trying to lose weight and it's just not working. And I said, well, why do you want to lose weight? It was, the normal answers that we all have. Like, I want to look better. I want to feel better. And I was like, okay, but that's not it. Why? I want you to dig a little bit deeper. Turns out the real reason why is she wanted to be able to live longer so she could experience more of her children's lives. That was really it. And I said, we got to it. And I said, that's it. How does your energy shift when you say, I want to look better and feel better versus I want to be around longer to experience my children's lives. And she goes, oh, wow. The change is immediate. And so when I talk about the disproportionate amount of energy, is that the belief that we have carries a lot of weight, but no weight is going to be heavier than the weight of our own belief about ourselves.
Lauren, do you think people are afraid to dig a level deeper because they're afraid that they'll fail? Like, are they afraid to dig into that actual pain of why do I really want to make or facilitate this change? Because at a deep level, going back to belief, maybe they don't believe that they're capable of accomplishing it?
I think sometimes, definitely. I think sometimes too, not all of us know how to do it. Not all of us, sometimes we need assistance. Not all of us have been trained to go deep. Not all of us have been trained to ask the right questions. And so, yeah, I do think to some degree that has to do with it. I know I've worked with several people that they would rather have the knowing of, they know what failure feels like. So they're more comfortable with failure than they are success. And even though it's like it comes in the form of self-sabotage sometimes. But yeah, I do think that that has to do with it at times, because success is still a heavy burden to bear. And I know a lot of people don't think that, but when you think about what comes with success, and when I'm speaking to people and like, high level performers that experience this, what I notice is that a lot of times it's not success they're scared of. It's the burden of having to maintain it, having to deal with the expectations that come with success. It's the afterwards. And so, yes, I do feel like sometimes there's a fear of also digging up these feelings, of digging up these experiences, of digging up like what it really means and looking in the mirror. That's not an easy thing to do. But one of the things I realized, I'm actually in the process of writing a book. And in this part of the book, I forgot I'd written this, but I experienced, and we actually talked about it on your last podcast with you guys, is that I experienced, one of my best friends, taking her own life when we were 15. And I was reading through it and reading through like the healing process. And something I'd written was that my tank was empty. My emotional tank was empty. I had nothing left to give. Or so I thought. I had more. I just didn't know it yet. What I realized is sometimes you have to empty the tank to refill it. And so for some people, finding the reason and the belief requires emptying the tank before we can refill it and facing some of the things we've dealt with. Some things are much heavier than, being told, you're not very good at speaking. And so, yes, I do think that can play a role as well.
I was on the phone with a client recently who has a net worth of $15 million, unbelievable human being, and she has achieved much of the success that most people dream of, even beyond their wildest dreams. And in order for her to transition into this next level of her life, I actually told her it's very clear to me that just like me, there's a part of you that is so scared to get to that next level of success. Not because you're afraid of failure and don't fail forward, not because you're afraid of success, but because you're afraid of what it will do to your relationships. I didn't know this originally. When Kevin and I were at an event 3 years ago, a woman brought me up on stage and she talked about the 5 main fears. One of them was failure, one of them was success, and there was a couple others. Turns out I'm afraid of success, and I realized that it's not because I'm afraid of success and that I won't be able to sustain it. It's because I knew on some level that when I get successful, who I'll have to become to sustain it will be completely and utterly unrelatable to everyone I love. And quite frankly, here we are 3 years later, and almost no one who was consistently in my life back then is still in my life now as we've become more successful. Can you please talk to our listeners about the fear of no longer fitting in with their past relationships? Because that part of you that needs or wants love from those old associations is going to have to burn down if you want that new phoenix to rise. Because the truth of the matter is, some of those people are going to judge you. some of those people are going to have opinions about you. And I tried to dance around this for way too long. I wanted to bring everyone with me, my high school friends and my college friends and my corporate friends, and everybody's going to believe in themselves and everybody loves personal development. Everyone has goals and dreams. No, absolutely not.
Hey guys, my name is Jacob Valdalon, and I just finished Next Level group coaching. When I joined, I wasn't sure what I was walking into. But during the entire course and the program, I figured out it's not something that I wanted to do, it's something I needed to do. They helped set me on the right path with learning how to do PPTs, peak performance tracking, and every 2 weeks I was gaining new awarenesses and getting a lot more happier, first of all, in my health, wealth, and love, but also winning more practically and tactically in business. So if you're looking to upgrade your life and get to that next level, definitely sign up for that group coaching.
Talk to our listeners who do have goals and dreams about what is going to be required of them to actually achieve them when it comes to cutting ties with past relationships, or at least reallocating time.
Well, it's so funny. Oh my gosh, this is such a big topic right now. Not only in my own life, because I feel this myself, but in every single person I work with, there is a constant with high performers, and it's that they feel unrelatable to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And even in a room of many, they feel alone. And there's this, this one quote, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, but I would read it to to our new draft picks every year at the Yankees. And it was to prepare to be unrelatable. And it was this idea that to be great, you have to be ready to be unrelatable. People will tell you that you should quit, or you're crazy for doing what you're doing, or why don't you get a real job? And they're not saying that because they don't love you. Oftentimes they're saying it because they do, because they're projecting their own fears. And to some degree, it's their way of protecting. But what they don't realize and what they won't understand is that the pursuit of greatness and the risk that's associated is way more fulfilling than the comfort of knowing exactly what tomorrow brings. And so prepare to be unrelatable. One of the things that it kind of goes against is this human need to want to fit in wherever we go. And I was listening to a podcast earlier today with Brene Brown, and she talked a little bit about this. And she said, one of the things I've learned about belonging anywhere that we go, it actually has nothing to do with fitting in, because fitting in would require us to become whatever the environment is that we are in. It requires us to adapt and to adjust. And now adaptation and adjustment is not necessarily a bad thing until we begin to lose who we are and we become somebody we are not. And so what true belonging is showing up as you, showing up as yourself in any environment that you are in. And to some degree, belonging is not fitting in at all, but it's being willing to show up as is, whatever that looks like in whatever group you're in. And that's a daily practice. That is not something that is like, okay, I got it, the skill is done, like we are good. That is something that, we have to practice on a day-to-day basis, because if anybody listening here is anything like me, it's easy to be in a room with others and want to adhere to what it is that would make others feel comfortable. And it's almost this degree of pleasing the people that you're around. But part of true belonging, and again, back to the belief, is the courage to be exactly who you are, whether it is accepted or not. And that's not an easy thing to do. And so, Alan, with your question regarding, people that, struggle with feeling alone and struggle with maybe not fitting in and all of that, I actually think that is a indication that if you're trying to be great, you are actually on the right path.
Yep.
That it is part of it. It's kind of like when you're in, like, I like to call it the growth zone. When we're outside of our comfort zone, we're growing. And I've actually identified the key, signs and symptoms of myself that indicate I am in the growth zone. And so for me, that is when I am highly uncertain. Lots of self-doubt plays in my mind. I question myself a lot. I tend to have a lot of physiological signs of nervousness, anxiety, and fear that show up. And that tells me if I'm not uncomfortable, I am not growing, because you can't be comfortable and grow at the same time. So I think that what this is also is this idea of feeling unrelatable, this idea of being surrounded by plenty and feeling alone, and this idea of having to let go of fitting in and showing up as is. I think sometimes that's also an indicator that you're in the growth zone, but you're in the zone of greatness, and it's a part of the process to becoming the highest version of you.
Lauren, when we first met, you said something to me that I found really interesting. You said, "It's very clear to me that you have a great relationship with discomfort." And I had never been told that before, and thank you, by the way, for that compliment. But what I've figured out since then is that I have a very good relationship with my own discomfort, but what I have a bad relationship with is making others uncomfortable. And not making them uncomfortable, that's the wrong frame. What I mean is being in the presence of other people while they are uncomfortable. Lauren, you give speeches, okay, all over the world. You gave a speech to us. I gave a speech at Next Level Live that was about how people do not believe in themselves enough, and there was some heavy mirrors. Okay, powerful speech, heavy mirrors. When you hear truth and you know it, and you've maybe not been living up to your own greatness, you know it, and here it is right in front of you if you want to look in the mirror. I can sense the audience's discomfort. And what I've had to learn to do is actually see that as a good thing, because they're sitting in their own discomfort of contemplating their own past and their own future and how they are not leaning into their own greatness. Lauren, how have you overcome the discomfort that comes from your greatness making others uncomfortable?
Well, I have to stop making it about me. Because if it's about me, then I'm worried about my discomfort I feel as a reflection of how they're feeling. That's making it about me. That's allowing my ego to get in the way. But the truth is that true love is not telling people what they want to hear. It's telling people what they need to hear, and being willing to sit in that discomfort with them. You know what it's like? It's like if anybody plays sports here, or even, they were dancers or singers or, actors, actresses, we've all had coaches in our lives. And when a coach comes up to you and says, that is unacceptable, that performance is unacceptable, you're better than that. We may hate that person in the moment because it hurts. But if we are somebody who desires to get better, we allow that to sink in and we reflect. The thing is that it is the coach's job, is a person's job, if you care about others, to tell them what they need to hear. It is their job whether or not they choose to receive it. And so I let go of whether or not people choose to receive based on, if you're sitting here in front of me, if you chose to be at this keynote, then you already have chose to become better. Whether or not you were expecting, a rah, here you go, make yourself feel good speech or not, is not my responsibility. And if you want that, I'm probably not the speaker for you. But if you want to get better and you're willing to sit through discomfort, I can promise you I'm going to freaking deliver. And I had to remove my ego. It's the same way as when you have a friend that you love dearly and they're not seeing a blind spot. And it's the same with me. I've had it happen to me as well. And it is not comfortable, but man, I'm thankful for it. And Kobe explained it actually once. He said, if I'm sitting across from you and you got spinach in your teeth, I'm going to tell you got something in your teeth. And he goes, people often don't tell you because it's the discomfort that they feel as a reflection of being honest with you. And so if I allow my discomfort to get in the way, I'm going to really struggle helping others. And so I've had to realize it isn't about me. It's about them. And if I love them, I'm going to be willing to sit in the discomfort with them.
Lauren, you've dropped
Powerful.
many, many wisdom bombs here. Okay. Now, if I was to say, I could ask you a couple maybe easier questions that you've heard before. What advice would you give 13-year-old Lauren? What advice would you give 21-year-old Lauren? What advice would you give Lauren last month?
Shut up and listen.
Hmm.
I think sometimes when one of the things I know about myself is I read a ton. I'm constantly learning. But I think some of the best lessons can be learned not from consuming, but just from listening to others and being observant. And sometimes when I get really excited about a topic or I get really excited to help somebody, like I'm like, oh, I know exactly how to help them. My gut instinct is to jump in and help, where sometimes that's not always the best thing to do. And so I think last month I had that happen. And I had this realization that I was watching back one of the clips from one of my talks. I watch every single talk that I do. I evaluate it. What can I do better? What did I learn? What do I need to improve? And what went well? And I
That was
You
last.
said that one. I was gonna say you said that one last.
Yeah,
which,
exactly.
which, by the way, is usually not how I do it, but you can
Yeah.
see how this one went. And it was the Q&A at the end. And it was almost as if she said this part of the question, and I already had an answer for that part of the question, but she continued, and I already had started my answer. And if I would have just shut up and listened, I would have been given so much. I would have been able to hear so much more, and I would have probably been able to give her a better answer and response. But sometimes I don't. I get so excited about wanting to help that it overshadows the benefit of just listening and being fully present and then being able to help to an even better degree. So that's one thing I could say that in my evaluations that I was like, okay, I want to do this better and, slow down.
I get a change up question, and then Alan, you can do one more, and then we'll let Lauren go.
Love it. Love it.
And again, you might not have an answer to this. Hopefully, you've never been asked this. What advice do you believe you will give yourself 1 month from today about the previous month?
Let me think about that.
I'm just winging it. You know what I mean? I'm just winging questions.
No, this is a good one because, I'm a little bit in the growth zone myself right now. And so when you guys mentioned that, like the growth zone was very on my mind because I actually have an event happening in May. And my first event that I hosted was actually for mental performance coaches. So other people that are in my field or do what I do, or similar industries. This one is for professionals of all kinds, but we're really talking about leaders, people that run teams, people that lead, people that want to help develop culture and not only be able to help their people navigate, the psychological pressures they're experiencing, but also being able to do that, for themselves and for the team that they lead. And it's interesting because when I was, selling my other one, it was very easy because I'm a part of that demographic. Where this one, these are all my clients I work with, but this is the first time I've ever, sold to this kind of demographic. And selling is very uncomfortable for me. And I've had to kind of reframe it and rewire it. So I think I'll have a lot of advice for myself a month from now, because I have a lot of work to do within that way of like how I'm communicating and how I am, coming across in terms of my belief, because I'm setting the table with some incredible people and inviting people to come take a seat and doing that in a way that is authentic to me without feeling like, hey, come buy a ticket. I hate that. I want people that want to be there because what I'm putting together is incredible. But having said that, it's very uncomfortable for me. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I have an answer for you right now, but my guess is it's going to be surrounding my belief when it comes to selling this event.
Well, as always, your self-awareness is very inspiring. Genuinely, your self-awareness has always been very inspiring to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We are both very impressed, Lauren. You've grown a lot, even since the last episode. It's wild. It's wild. And your speaking has come way up too. Strong work. Those reviews of all your speeches is definitely helping.
And your
last
midweek
question.
Your midweek things, I've been watching them. They're very, very good.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Gosh, see, and this is what I appreciate. I appreciate when not just good feedback, because anybody who's listening here, Kevin and Alan have also given me tough feedback before. But that's why I'm so thankful for this friendship and relationship, because it's not just to blow smoke. And so I know when you guys give feedback, and especially positive ones, it's because you mean it. And so I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you.
We both see it, and we practice speaking every day. So it's unbelievable. It's very, very strong. Seriously, and I appreciate you saying that too, because we have given tough feedback as well. Lauren, my last question.
Yeah.
So it is very clear to me, honestly, and it's fascinating because you and I are on, I think, similar growth trajectories in many ways. I think you're transitioning from the hero to the guide. I really do. I think you're acting like a guide and not trying to save everybody, finally. Lauren, same. First of all, kudos, because it's been unbelievably challenging. Second of all, I know you've been getting a lot of negative feedback thrown at you from people from your past, probably. And you're sitting in the discomfort of allowing others to learn how to self-soothe that you used to be there for, right? And the reason I know all that is because I'm going through it too. And I just want to say I see the growth. I see that you're a guide now. And my last question is this. What do you have to say to our listeners or viewers who maybe have been heroes that need to evolve into the guide? And the analogy here is don't go out into the storm to save the other ships. Your ship will burn down too. Be the lighthouse that's shining so bright to guide people into the harbor. So you are becoming the lighthouse. It's very clear to me. And I see that in myself as well. Kevin, in many regards too. So what do you give for advice of how have you transitioned from the hero to the guide?
It's funny. It comes back to ego for me in a lot of ways. So there's two things. Number one, I'm not a very patient person. Like, I'm very aware of this flaw. Very aware. And my husband reminds me quite often. So we've got a little accountability there too. But I'm not very patient. And so sometimes I just want to jump in and help. When I realize sometimes that does more damage than good. And when I started to really reflect on what is best is not always me doing the work for others. Sometimes what is best is doing the work myself so that it can inspire others to do the work themselves. Because it's, you know what it's like? It's like somebody, we talked about this, I think the first time we met, somebody that gives advice and doesn't take their own, I would never hire.
Same.
Ever. It seems like a very small, important piece, but it is everything. Because how do you know what I'm experiencing and what I'm going through if you haven't done it yourself? So I always think of kind of the oxygen mask principle. That there's a reason they tell you to put yours on first. Because if you can't put yours on first, you certainly can't help or be impactful anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And so it's a hard lesson to learn, and one that it's probably going to be a journey I experience for the rest of my life. But I will say that I'm beginning to notice, Lauren, if you go and you solve everybody's problems, sure, it may have, the first level consequences, you're solving it, and that sounds good. But what's the second and third level consequence? Mm-hmm. And that is that when they experience this again, they're not going to know how to handle it themselves. Mm-hmm. And so don't take away somebody's experience and ability to learn. That is a greater crime than anything else.
Well said, Lauren. Well said.
Very
and
well
I've
said.
definitely been experiencing that. I know Kevin has as well. And it's the necessary evolution of becoming to that next level. So thank you, Lauren. This is fire. Absolute
heavy one
fire.
today. Little heavy. We're all in our emotions. Alan and I, for the listeners, had a tough conversation before this. That's why if I'm quiet, that is why I'm in my feels a little bit. Lauren, this was truly wonderful, as it always is, and as we knew it would be. Where can people, hypothetically, they say this Lauren sounds like a cool human. Where can I learn more about her?
Well, that's very kind. And the best way to honestly to find me is to actually go to my website, which is laurenjohnsonandco.com. And that's all spelled out, Lauren Johnson, ANDCO.com. And all my social media handles are on there. You can sign up for my newsletter on there. All my information for my events are on there. So that's the best place.
And we will link all of that in the show notes so you can one-click satisfaction. You'll end up at the website if you click on the link in the bio.
Strong work, team. Lauren, last thing I want to say is your impatience, I think, comes from how much you believe in yourself. Because everyone I know who has ridiculously high self-belief has that level of urgency. So keep it up and don't let anyone dwindle that.
I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Next Level Nation, the one and only Lauren Johnson. Give her a follow, like her content, all of that happy jazz. Lauren, thank you again. We love you, and we will talk to you all soon.
Please reach out.